Sure. Okay, this week we're studying session number 5, and it's lack of trust. Now I'm going to read you a short little story here out of the Leader's Guide. It says, most of us exercise trust several times each day. We trust our car to get us where we want to go. We trust other drivers to obey traffic laws as they drive the same roads we do. We trust cashiers to ring up our orders correctly. We trust the chairs in which we sit to support us. Regarding even bigger issues of life, we probably have a small number of family or friends we trust deeply. We know these people care about us and have our best interest in mind, so we trust them with our most important concerns. Most Christians will say they trust God for salvation, while admitting that it's harder to trust Him in other situations. They find it more comfortable to follow their own wisdom than to seek His guidance. Yet God calls His people to trust Him in every situation. We will be with Him in eternity, but He also desires us to trust Him here on earth. Today's passage reveals how even Moses, God's great leader, failed to trust God in a critical situation. As you dig into this session, ask God to help you trust Him in areas where you struggle. At the same time, ask Him to help you know how to encourage adults who also may be struggling to trust God. Now, everybody, we'll turn to our lesson. The session 5, lack of trust. Numbers 22 through 13. People generally fall into two categories. Those who read and follow the instructions and those who think they can figure it out as they go along. Those who fall into this latter category may do so because of heightened self-confidence, impatience, or a history of past successes. Sometimes, though, at the end of the project, those in the second category may be left with extra unused parts for an end product that doesn't look quite like it's supposed to.
Supposed to be a few nuts and bolts left in there.
What did I
That's
tell you?
what he said. I said, now you're the one that just jumps in there, first the instructions in the trash, jumps in there and ends up with the extra. I'm the one that reads every bit of it, you know. And he said, you're supposed to end up with extra parts.
We don't know how to read.
It's not put together right, Alan, if you don't have extra parts.
Right.
I think that's a male.
I was
I'm
gonna
gonna
say,
say it's
I knew that was gonna come out of you, I knew that.
She pinpointed me right to start with. She said, you're a number 2. I said, wait a minute. I said, are we talking about the lesson or is this your thoughts? But it says, do you find yourself in category 1 or 2?
That's pretty much the division between husbands and wives.
That's kind of like asking for directions, isn't it?
yeah, you'll drive 10 miles out of the way not to.
No, I just ride around until Skylar says, Daddy, we done been by this 5
The world is round, we'll get there.
Why do you think that is your tendency? On what kind of task is it most important to follow instructions all the way to the end?
No matter what task it is, you follow the instructions all the way to the end.
David, don't get the rest of us men in trouble with that. But that's true. That's what we should do, you know. But all of us fall short. Sometimes we don't. And just like Alan said, I just told Michelle last night, I said, I just put it together. If I got anything left, I'll break it off in the trash. But we should follow instructions.
There is always parts left, four situations like that.
We insist on that.
On what kinds of tasks is it most important to follow instructions all the way to the end?
That ties back into the lesson, our walk as Christians. Our walk as Christians.
Yep.
To win the race.
That's the most important thing to follow by the,
Yeah.
and God gave us a whole book of it. But even with the book that He gave us that has nothing but the truth in it, I fail a lot of times to do what He tells me to. And you do end up in some situations. Understand the context, Numbers 15:1 through 22:1. Numbers 11:1 states that the people began complaining. This introduces a series of 7 rebellions which continued through chapter 21. In Hebrew writing, the climax of a series usually occurs in the middle. True to form, the 4th complaint was the most serious offense. Number 1 is Numbers 11:1 through 3, mentions a general public about hardship, a complaint about hardships. Rather than being grateful for God's provisions, the people focused on their discomfort. God responded with fire. Moses prayed and the fire and complaints ceased. Numbers 11:4 through 34 records the people complaining about their daily manna. Moses told God that the pressure was too great to bear. God instructed him to appoint 70 elders to help. Numbers 11:35 through 12:16 says Miriam and Aaron complained about Moses' wife. Their greater complaint was that God seemingly spoke only to and through Moses. God struck Miriam with a skin infection. Moses prayed and God healed her. Numbers 13:1 through 14 and 45 tells of 12 spies going into Canaan for 40 days. 10 brought back a negative report, and the Israelites refused to enter. God caused the Israelites to wander in the wilderness for 1 year for each day the spies were in Canaan. Numbers 16:1 through 50 says Koran staged a rebellion against Moses. He enlisted ringleaders to help him, then others joined in. God was ready to destroy the Israelites. Moses interceded. The earth opened and swallowed Korah and his ringleaders. God then rained fire down on all the others. When the Israelites complained about what had happened, God sent a plague through the camp. Number 6, Numbers 22 through 13 tells of the people again complaining about water. God provided water from a rock after Moses struck rather than spoke to. This is the focus of today's study. Numbers 21:4 through 9 says the people again complained about the food and water situation. God responded by sending serpents into the camp. They bit the people who then died. The people repented, Moses prayed, and God told him to raise a bronze snake on the pole. All who looked upon it recovered. And as we read, just think about and keep in mind the things that Moses did right and what they also did wrong. Explore the text, the problem. Numbers 22 through 5. There was no water in the community, so they assembled against Moses and Aaron. The people quarreled with Moses and said, "If only we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord. Why have you brought the Lord's assembly into the wilderness for us and our livestock to die here? Why have you led us up from Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It's not a place of grain, figs, vines, and pomegranates, and there is no water to drink." In verses 2 through 3, the Israelites were in the wilderness of Zin at Kadesh Barnea. They had been there 40 years earlier. From there, Moses had sent 12 spies into the land, and the people decided against entering Canaan. In the intervening years, they wandered in the wilderness. All aged 20 and above died during those 4 decades. So that was God's punishment on them for not believing in Him, wasn't it? When they got there, when the 10 spies that came back with the negative story about the land they were going into, basically convinced all the older ones not to go, that they didn't have enough faith in God to go in there and take the land. Only Aaron and who was that man with?
Joshua and Caleb.
Yeah.
Joshua and Caleb
Was the only two that came back with a positive, saying, "Oh, we can do this. We can." They had faith in God. They knew what they could do, but because of the disbelief in the other ones, God made them wander in the desert for 40 more years. So that generation would pass away, and a new generation would come along to go into the promised land. The need for water had been an ongoing problem. This was one of their earliest challenges after crossing the Red Sea. It's in Exodus 15, 23 through 26. Later at Rephidim, likely just north of Mount Sinai, God supplied water by having Moses strike a rock in 17:1 through 7. That was 40 years earlier. Most of this generation had not seen that miracle. Verse 2 says the people assembled against their leaders. Although not violent, they were intense and assertive. The Israelites quarreled intensely with Moses and Aaron. When the people complained about a lack of water 40 years earlier, they asked, "Why did you ever bring us up from Egypt to kill us with thirst?" Here they said they would have preferred to have perished with the brothers who had died. They likely were referring to those who died following Korah and his rebellion against Moses. Verses 4 through 5. The Hebrews were not posing a question. Rather, they were making an accusation. This is often the case with a question that begins with why, especially if the why is followed by would, have, or did you. The terminology that Israel's used, the Lord's assembly, repeats the phrase Korah and his followers used when they staged their rebellion against Moses in Numbers 16:3. These are the only two occurrences of the phrase in the book of Numbers. The phrase created a Moses versus them scenario and underscored the severity of both challenges to Moses' leadership. The question clarifies the Israelites' concern. They thought they and their animals were about to die of thirst in this wilderness, meaning in this vast desert. Deuteronomy 1:19 describes it as the great and terrible wilderness. The question clarifies the Israelites' concern. They thought they and their animals were about to die of thirst in this wilderness, meaning in the vast desert. Deuteronomy 1:19 describes how it was great and terrible wilderness. Verse 5 drips at irony. The you in plural, the people blamed Moses and Aaron for leading them from Egypt. They evidently had forgotten about the Lord's deliverance. From the forced labor of the Egyptians and their slavery to them, they gave no thought of God redeeming them with his outstretched arm and great acts of judgment. Also, they called Kadesh Barnea this evil place. What an irony. God had led them to an extremely good land flowing with milk and honey in Numbers 14:7 through 8. This was Joshua's and Caleb's description of Canaan. The people would have been in an extremely good land instead. They were in an evil place because of their lack of faith. Finally, the people longed for the food they had in Egypt. They spoke of grain, figs, vines, and pomegranates. These, though, were not foods from Egypt. While in captivity, they had cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. Had they entered Canaan, they could have been enjoying grain, figs, grapes, and pomegranates instead of manna. Why do we tend to romanticize the good old days, even though they weren't always so good? Why do we do that?
Living in the past. Living in the past.
Yeah.
The greater the reward, the greater you gotta work for it.
I remember the good old days of going to my grandparents in Tennessee, back up in the mountains, and I think how much I enjoyed that and liked it. But then I started to think that means going outside in another little building using that creek. That meant bathing in the creek. It meant working in the garden. There was no air conditioning, so maybe those days weren't all that good.
I can remember us taking and drinking out of a dipper. You know,
Oh, yeah, everybody got
put some big old barrel and put the dipper in the water. Didn't think a thing about it.
I believe sometimes, especially when you're dealing in hard times or bad things are going on and you're looking in the past, you're just remembering all the good things that you had. You don't remember that, yes, you had bad things going on back then too. It's kind of our brain going, it was so much better then. But when you really, like you said, look back on, I remember going to an outhouse. It ain't fun.
We're also failing to trust God, what he has done, can do, and will do.
this generation needs to know more about the good old days. The
Well,
younger generation needs to know more about those good old days.
I think a lot of times when we fail to trust God, we get so carried away with thinking about the good old days that we forget where we actually came from, what we actually went through to get to where we are today. Now, I tell Michelle all the time, you know, me and you probably had some of the good old days back in high school. But then when you think a little bit deeper, you had some hard times back then, but you prefer not to remember them. You just want to think about the good stuff.
Yeah, my son Lucas is always saying, Mom, I wish I'd grown up when you did. Those were the good old days. And I said, well, actually, they were pretty turbulent back in the 70s if you lived through it. But yeah.
That's kind of like Miss Smith. She's little, but y'all don't let her fool you.
Yeah.
She probably gave me more balance than any other teacher I had. And now I'm standing up here in front of her. Look at her, she's holding up one finger.
And I didn't do it.
Well,
I had it
no,
done.
you went and got the math teacher across the hall, which was a man.
That was good old days, wasn't it?
That's one of those memories I block out. Ricky, do you have something you want to say?
You know, like me and David and my sister, we were growing up. We had a lady that was an angel to us, like a grandmother to us. She would make us go in the garden every day and bend over and get those green beans and taters and all that. She said, if you don't bend over, you're not gonna eat when we get back to the house. I'm gonna tell you something, you get back to the house, it was always good.
David, did you have your hand up? Okay. Yes, sir.
I kind of liken this to, our kids today don't understand VCRs and cassette tapes and so forth. And these guys are trying to remember Egypt when they were little kids or not even born at all, so.
Yeah, they have totally blocked out the slavery part of it, haven't they? They're just remembering the good things. They forgot how hard they had to work. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think sometimes, and we all do it. It's not just the young people, it's not any generation. Yeah, if you think back in the years, we've all been there, and we all still do it. And I think that what happens with us, and the Israelites did it too, is when we go through difficult times, and you talked about this a little bit, that we lose focus on what is in front of us and what really matters. And what mattered really, I believe, to the Israelites was doing God's will. It's just that they felt defeated, and I think that when we go through difficult times, we can be discouraged, and we can begin to feel defeated. And Moses was, he was a great leader and someone for us to really focus on him and what led him and why did he keep his faith instead of focusing on the Israelites, because we've all been there, we will all be there again. It's what made him stand out? Where was his faith, just like Abraham? The faith and the trust and the belief in God. I think that's what's important in these chapters.
And you know, you get looking at the good old times, and you might just be coming up on something that's hard once a month or something, you know. But you get to looking back and you kind of get discouraged. Well, why am I going through this? I didn't do it back then, you know. But life goes on and it changes every day.
And like she said, with the Israelites, they weren't trusting in God where they were in that situation. They were thinking of the past.
No, they're thinking about the food they had, the water they had. Then the thing was, they had to work for that, slavery. And God was just giving it to them to lead them through, you know, to get them through the desert to the promised land that He had for them.
And each age group kind of went back to what they remembered. The first age group went back to all the great food we used to eat back in Egypt. And now this group goes back to things were so much better. Why didn't we just die when God, you know, destroyed everyone else that was in disobedience? They went back to their time.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else? Okay, the plan, Numbers 26 through 8. Then Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the doorway of the tent of meeting. They fell face down, and the glory of God, the Lord, appeared to them. The Lord spoke to Moses, take the staff and assemble the community. You and your brother Aaron are to speak to the rock while they watch, and it will yield its water. You will bring out water for them from the rock and provide drink for the community and their livestock. Verse 6, Numbers 11 through 21, records the Israelites' 7 rebellions or complaints. With each, Moses and sometimes Aaron interceded for God's people. Among the 7, this is the only one that specifies when Moses and Aaron made their inquiry before the Lord, saying they went from the presence of the assembly, underscores the Moses and Aaron versus them situation. Face down was the common position when interceding for God's people. Moses and Aaron did this when the Israelites refused to enter Canaan. They also fell face down when God threatened to destroy his people after Korah's rebellion. Jesus assumed this same position when he pleaded, let this cup pass from me. Each instance was of a desperate prayer. The position communicates an anguished and humble attitude. Verse 7 through 8, the Lord spoke to Moses. How simple yet profound is this statement. It occurs 32 times in the book of Numbers, beginning with chapter 1, verse 1. This was the voice Moses first heard at the burning bush in Exodus 3:4. It was the voice that spoke creation into being. This voice declared at Jesus' baptism, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. One cannot help but wonder about God's voice at the tent meeting. Did only Moses hear it? Was God addressing only Moses, but both men heard his voice? Or was God's voice audible at all? Scripture does not say. Scripture does say what Moses and Aaron were to do. Did the staff belong to Moses or Aaron? If so, Moses, he previously used it while tending his father-in-law's flocks. It became a snake in the courts of Pharaoh. The Nile turned to blood when Moses struck the water with it. More likely, the staff was Aaron's. In Numbers 17, God miraculously caused Aaron's rod to bud, blossom, and produce almonds, all in one night. Afterward, God told Moses to put Aaron's staff back in front of the testimony to be kept as a sign for the rebels in Numbers 17:10, emphasis added. With rod in hand, Moses and Aaron were to speak to the rock, and water would come forth. This was different from when God instructed Moses to hit the rock with his staff so water would pour forth and the people could drink in Exodus 17:6. Most people in the Numbers 20 community had not seen this happen. What kinds of difficulties get you face down, either literally or figuratively, before the Lord?
Kids.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Health issues.
Loved ones, if there's something going on with loved ones.
Maybe we'll run into financial difficulties. We don't get to the point where we don't feel like we can provide for our family.
Just events that are fearful.
Anything that, like you said, anything that might strike a bit of fear in our hearts. And that's when you get on your face and call to the Lord, isn't it?
Watching the news nowadays is
Watching what?
the news.
Watched in 20 years, they could.
Really, it's probably good.
Key doctrine. God is an intelligent, spiritual, and personal being, the creator, redeemer, preserver, and ruler of the universe. See Psalm 146, 5 through 10, or Isaiah 41, 10. The result, Numbers 29 through 13. So Moses took the staff from the Lord's presence, just as he had commanded him. Moses and Aaron summoned the assembly in front of the rock, and Moses said to them, listen, you rebels. Must we bring water out of this rock for you? Then Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his staff, so that abundant water gushed out, and the community and their livestock drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust me to demonstrate my own holiness in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this assembly into the land I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the Israelites quarreled with the Lord, and he demonstrated his holiness to them. So Moses and Aaron made a mistake, didn't they?
Yes.
They let the crowd get to them so bad that they wanted to address the crowd themselves and not do it like the Lord instructed them to do.
And put yourself in Moses' place.
Yeah.
They missed verse 1 where Miriam had died. So
Yeah.
he's probably at his most vulnerable spot right now.
That's right.
Devil got him.
I guess it was a temptation of all the commotion going on around him. He just couldn't focus on God like he normally did.
How many times did he have to intervene on their part? I mean, you gotta take that into consideration, how many times Moses got taken down, even when these people were disrespectful and ungrateful.
Well, I think somewhere Moses may have slipped just a little bit on his feet and then quite trust in God like he should have, because he got so angry with the people. He let his emotions override what he was supposed to do. I do that all the time. I'm sure y'all don't. But I do it all the time. And I find myself in a tougher situation than I was before it even started.
Think about it, we only have a couple of times listed in our Bible, but they were with him for 40 years.
Yep.
There were probably more times than you count on your fingers and toes that he had to be in trouble, you know.
Well, Michelle and I have only been married 20 years now. It's adding up.
Yeah. I don't think I could have been that patient.
I know that, just think that, like you said, what he put up with for 40 years from these people, and there was, over 1 million people there? Can you imagine everybody coming at you one time, even half of them complaining to you, and God was giving them everything they needed? Okay. Where am I, 9:11? Moses took the staff from the Lord's presence, meaning from the tabernacle. He did just as God had commanded him. This had been Moses' practice since first encountering God at the burning bush. How long, though, would that last? Moses and Aaron's patience was gone. They were exhausted and they overreacted. The verb summon carries the idea of convening a group for a specific purpose. This would not be an informal assembly or meeting. God had given the directive and Moses was responding obediently. The multitude gathered in the front of the rock. The word referred to a bare-faced cliff. Thus Moses was bringing the crowd to the base of a cliff wall. Emphatically, Moses demanded they listen to what he had to say. The Hebrew term for rebels typically refers to individuals who are defying God. The people had complained about a lack of water and food before. What was different this time? Moses had not responded like this before. Thus Moses' anger, rather than the people's behavior, caused this outburst. In asking, must we bring water out, Moses was calling attention to Aaron and himself. Must we is radically different from must God. Any accolades and praises would go to him and Aaron. Even though Moses asked, must we bring? He evidently struck the rock alone. Despite God's instructing Moses to speak to the rock, he instead struck it twice. Did God withhold his blessings because of Moses' disobedience? No. Water gushed out enough to satisfy the thousands and thousands of people and their cattle. God did not punish the people because their leader had defiled him. How much water did God provide? The psalmist said he split rocks in the wilderness and gave them drink as abundant as the depths. He brought streams out of stone and made water flow down like rivers in Psalm 78:15-16. Moses and Aaron placed their plan in front of God's. Verses 12 through 13. Instead of speaking to the rock, Moses struck it. How did striking the rock indicate Moses and Aaron did not trust God to demonstrate his holiness? Scripture does not say, but a few connections could apply. First, God is holy. This fact echoes throughout the Bible. God calls his followers to be holy. To disobey was and is a sin and thus a violation of his holiness. Second, to flagrantly defy God's instructions meant the person thought he knew better than God. Moses and Aaron placed their plan in front of God, in front of God's. God saw this as an act of rebellion. Third, hitting the rock to get water could appear to be a magician's or sorcerer's trick, or the assembly might have thought this was a skill Moses had learned as a shepherd. But for water to come out because someone spoke to the rock was beyond human explanation. Moses' action moved the focus away from God, his power, uniqueness, and ability, and put it instead on Moses. Because they had not followed God's instructions to the end, neither Moses nor Aaron would enter Canaan. This was the final and ultimate Moses and Aaron versus them scenario in this story. The word Meribah means contention or strife. That name reflected the people's quarreling with God rather than trusting him fully and obediently. Events at Meribah demonstrated God's holiness in two ways. First, God showed he was faithful. Second, by punishing Aaron and Moses, God showed that he expects obedience from all of his people. A person's status does not influence or dictate God's expectation. He expects all of us to trust him. He's no respect of persons, is he? So it didn't matter the greatness of Moses or just the average man. He had to pay for his sin that he done. What does it say about God's character that he provided such an abundance of water?
He loves his people and cares for them.
He was trying to show them what he has done and what he could do for them, wasn't he?
It is also showing that even though you're making some mistakes and all that, he'll still bless you and take care of you.
Bible skill. Numbers 20, 9 through 13 records the failure of Moses and Aaron to follow God's instructions exactly. As a result, God did not permit them to enter the promised land. Read the passage, noting how the Israelites frustrated Moses and Aaron in verse 10. Yet God held the leaders accountable for their disobedience. Do you think God owes leaders to a greater degree of accountability or the same? Explain your answer. If God has no respect of persons, then he's not going to treat one any different than he does the other, is he?
Now, the leaders are held to a higher standard.
Yeah.
It says that
Well, they're like the shepherd,
in
aren't they?
front of God and he's told that you did.
Okay, next page, apply the text. Believers can trust God even when current circumstances appear bleak. We can turn to God with our needs and concerns. Believers should recognize that ignoring God's instructions leads to consequences. Anybody got any comments they'd like to make?